In this episode, let's discuss the user interface and ergonomics of the Canon R5C versus the R5 camera. Externally, both cameras look very similar and feel the same in the hand. The controls and user interface, however, are worlds apart, especially in the R5C's video mode. Two cameras. Which one has better ergonomics, controls, and user interface for shooting video? Would these two cameras pair well as A and B cameras? Let's find out. Hello and welcome to Telvia. Let's start with the on-off switch on the R5C. The switch has three positions. If you are a photographer, you turn the R5C camera on by flipping the switch in the same direction as on the R5. A video shooter has to turn the switch in the opposite direction than on the R5 in order to power the R5C on. It is confusing when using these two cameras in a multi-cam shoot. The articulating screen on the R5C protrudes from the body to accommodate the cooling fan, and the panel behind the upper right corner of the screen has a cutout. This allows for an easy and ergonomic way to flip the screen out. This is a much better design than the notch on the R5 we have to use when the camera is on a tripod. That notch is too narrow for me to get a hold of the screen and open it. Once we turn both cameras on, we see that the fonts and symbols on the screen, in the info fields, and in the menu are much smaller on the R5C versus the fonts and symbol sizes on the R5. What is even more perplexing is that in photo mode, the R5C has somewhat smaller fonts and symbols than the R5, but they're still readable. But switch to video mode, and the fonts and symbols are even smaller than in photo mode. Some symbols are very difficult to recognize even with perfect vision. For example, the exposure mark is almost impossible to differentiate from the scale markers of the exposure meter. It would also be nice to have the exposure indicator in a different color, like yellow or orange. I hope Canon will offer us a choice for the font sizes on the display in the next firmware update. The R5C's menu structure and logic for the controls of key shooting parameters like focus, exposure, frame rate, and resolution are vastly different than on the R5. So using the R5 as a B cam for the R5C could be a potentially confusing and frustrating experience. Some of the features on the R5 many of us enjoy using, like the custom C1 to C3 shooting modes, are not available on the R5C. For example, to switch from 24 frames per second to 120 frames per second on the R5C requires several presses of assignable buttons or changing the settings in the menu. On the R5, it is easier and faster. You just press the button mod and select one of the user-programmed C1, C3 shooting modes, and it's done. The assignable buttons on R5C are a huge improvement in camera ergonomics versus the R5. I spent some time optimizing functions and locations for each button. To my surprise and delight, I found that 13 assignable buttons are enough to program my most accessed camera settings. I particularly like having one button assigned to face detection and tracking and another button to face autofocus options. This allows full and quick control for how autofocus behaves when people are detected in the frame. I will explain my custom button setup in detail in a separate video. The new exposure tools like waveform and false colors are great options to have on the R5C. However, the size of the waveform window cannot be changed or moved to a user-defined location, like on other cameras, for example, on the Lumix GH5 Mark II. The custom white balance is a perfect, long-awaited addition on the R5C. I now set my white balance on my R5 by dialing in the Kelvin value readout from the R5C when using the two cameras in multicam mode. One of my most favorite new features on the R5C are tally lights. I have been missing them on the R5 every time I shoot a scene when I'm in front of the camera. The new multifunction shoe is a curse and a blessing. I'm waiting for the new EM-E1D microphone from Canon to test it with the multifunction shoe, and will report about how well it works in a separate video. To avoid potential damage to the exposed contacts of the multifunction shoe, it cannot be used as a standard cold shoe for mounting a handle or other accessories. So I had to get a cage for my new R5C. I chose this new black Mamba half cage from Small Rig, and I'm impressed with the new design of this cage. I tried several cages for my Canon R and R5 and did not keep them because the cages didn't feel right in my hand when holding and operating the camera. The new half cage does not extend over the hand grip part of the camera and does not interfere with holding and operating the camera at all. It still provides all the same multiple mounting points for the accessories. The only downside of this cage is that it partially obscures the front tally light. Darn! Many new owners of the R5C have reported a short battery life, and I confirm that shooting beyond a couple of quick B-roll shots on the power from the internal battery is impractical. You'll find yourself constantly changing batteries at the most inopportune moments of the shoot. I expected the battery capacity to be a limitation when ordering my R5C. After researching power bank choices on the market, I bought this Power Tank Pro from Zendur. The capacity of this power bank is equivalent to the capacity of 12 LP E6NH batteries. When on a shoot, I keep the Power Tank Pro plugged into the R5C via a USB cable to keep the camera battery topped up between shots. When I need to move with the camera, I either unplug it or carry the Power Tank Pro in the top compartment of my camera bag with the USB cable over my shoulder plugged into the camera. Since I will be shooting many B-roll shots in RAW at 60 frames a second, and external power is required to operate the R5C camera in this mode, using an external power bank is a part of working with this camera. I think, however, that Canon has made the right choice by continuing to use a small LP E6NH battery for the R5C to keep the camera weight and size down and to make the R5C more appealing to hybrid shooters and many run-and-gun videographers. Overall, after getting some experience with the new video operating system on the R5C, I feel now that it is a more logical and practical system for controlling the camera when shooting video versus the operating system on the R5. 90% of my time using the R5C will be shooting video, and I'm glad to transition to the operating system used in the high-end Canon professional cinema cameras. Moving forward, I'm not sure I'm prepared to juggle between two such different operating systems on my A and B cameras. I am still considering, however, keeping my R5 as a backup. Stay tuned for next episodes about the R5C and the R5 cameras by liking and subscribing. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Cheers!